Hey guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. It's Michaela here. I'm doing a review today of one of my favorite series, I guess, and I'm so excited about this. For the first time, the two novellas, I guess, are being combined into a singular paperback, which you can buy. There's only the two books out in the series right now. I don't know if Becky Chambers is planning to add on to the series at all. It ended open-ended enough that there could be more in this series in the future, but at the moment, there's just the two books. If you didn't want to buy a teeny tiny book in hardcover, now you can get it in paperback for the first time. The first book is A Psalm for the Wild-Built. The second book is A Prayer for the Crown-Shy. The paperback looks like this, Monk and Robot. It has both books in there. It's just over 300 pages for both of them, so about the size of a regular book to read both of the novellas. And I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite books. I don't know how I haven't talked about it on the channel yet, but here, let me talk about them. If you have never heard of this series, I'm going to do a brief overall review of the plot, at least for the first one. I am going to talk about bits and pieces from both books. I don't think that the things I'm going to talk about are spoilery at all, so you're welcome to stay. But if you fully want like nothing going in, which is totally applicable, I'm going to talk about the plot of the first one a little bit. Give an overall review, and then talk a bit about stuff that might come up in both of them. So there's a chance I say something that might spoil you. So just be aware of that with this video. It's a series review and not just an individual book review. So there's a chance of that happening. In general, the plot on the first book follows sibling Dex, who is a monk for a god of small comforts. Their god is the god of a nice cup of tea or a soothing shower or a comforting afternoon nap. Things like that, where it's just calming and relaxing. They live in a world where previously a lot of the industry was done by robots until one day every single robot in the whole world got up, walked out into the woods, and never came back. Humanity had to figure out how to like recollect themselves after this and go back into working after this. So the world is much different than what it was when the robots left. For instance, a sibling Dex is a tea monk, so they go around in a caravan from town to city to town to city in a big loop every single year, where they just set up shop, and their job is to make a cup of tea for someone and listen to them. Sometimes the person will ask for a particular cup of tea, and sometimes, as sibling Dex is listening to their problems, they make a cup of tea that is meant to help them. And again, a small comfort, just somebody listening to you talk about your problems, talk about your wins, whatever it is, having a nice cup of tea. And they are very good at this. They worked very hard to make sure that they were very good at this. But for some reason, they're not feeling as fulfilled anymore with the job that they've been doing. It is a job that is very important, but at the same time, they're feeling like they've gotten into a monotonous sort of rut. And one of the things that they have always wanted to hear is crickets, which crickets have gone extinct in this world. They have a recording of crickets that they like to listen to, but they had heard that this one faraway monastery that has been blocked off and closed off from humans for a long time might still have some crickets there. So they decide on a whim they're going to turn their caravan off of the main road that they normally go around to go up to this monastery and find some crickets. On the way to that monastery, out of the woods walks a robot, and this is the first robot that anybody has seen in generations. And that robot is Mosscap, and then the story goes from there. You get to follow the two of them on their journey to the monastery, and then in the second book, Mosscap joins sibling Dex in traveling some of the cities and towns that the humans have made. That's the general plot of these guys. It's pretty small of a story, but I think that it's definitely still worth reading. When it comes to my overall review of this one, obviously I love it. I told you that it was one of my favorite books of all time. The way that I pitched this book as a bookseller, because I was pitching it since I read it, like every single day, I made sure that I had multiple copies of it so that I could talk about it with people. It is like a hug in a book. It is in the subgenre of science fiction called hope punk. If you've seen some of Gretchen and Mai's reviews, specifically of To Be Taught If Fortunate, which is also a Becky Chambers book that we did previously, I've talked about how hope punk as a genre is one of my favorite genres. It is this subgenre of sci-fi which I would love to see grow and flourish, which is focused much more on a positive view of the future, on a hopeful view of the future, as opposed to what we get a lot of in sci-fi, at least recently, dystopians, epic battles and wars between aliens, that sort of stuff, at least for me, over time has gotten very depressing. So reading a book like this in this genre is so refreshing when it comes to like what we could even possibly imagine the future to be. Sibling Dex and Moscap are both adorable. They're some of my favorite characters that I've ever read. Their discussions and philosophical wonderings are thought provoking without being jarring or aggressive in any way. There's a discussion in the second book about the way that humans have decided to do currency and change the way that we do currency, which is less of a I have a dollar and that dollar represents a certain amount of gold. And to pay for goods and services, you give that dollar over. It's a digital currency and it's more of like a social currency, more of like a kudos or like a thank you for the job that you've done. I'm going to give you this much for helping me out. And Moscap at one point asks, like, well, what if somebody doesn't have enough of the kudos that's been given to them in order to give to somebody else? They can still give those kudos whether they have them in the bank, quote unquote, or not. And Sibling Deck says if somebody is really in the negative, that tells us, the community, that they're probably struggling and we should reach out to them and see what they need to do, because that means that they're accepting a lot more than they're giving back to the community. So this idea that money is not a requirement, you don't get shut out from any services if you don't have, quote unquote, the money. It's a currency of some sort. You get what you need, and you give a certain amount of thank you in response for getting what you need. But there's never any punishment for not having that. Is like such an interesting take on the way that we could be doing it. Everybody is doing something useful. They're doing their job and providing a service, but at the same time nobody is able to like hoard wealth. Like there's no reason to hoard it. It doesn't get you anything, because it's basically just a bunch of people clapping you on the back, right? Like it's a social currency. It's not like a monetary like tangible thing. So just bits and pieces of world building like that were so interesting to me, and something's extremely unique to this particular series. I haven't seen it anywhere else, really, something equivalent to that. You may have picked up on it by the way that I'm calling Sibling Deck sibling and not brother or sister. Usually monks are a gendered term. They're sibling, they're non-binary. One of my favorite things about this book was the representation there. I remember when I like first went back into working at Barnes & Noble, there was someone who came over to me and asked me for recommendations with non-binary characters in sci-fi and fantasy, but they specifically asked for human non-binary characters. And at the time, I don't think we had anything in the store that I could give them. There were non-binary characters that may have been magical creatures, that may have been robots, androids, things like that. But this was one of the first books that I read and I had my hands on and could stock in the store that had a human non-binary character. I love that we never learn what biological sex Sibling Dex is, despite Sibling Dex having kind of relationships with other humans. They flirt with certain characters. There's nothing, it's not like an on-page romance, but there's that sort of banter with some other characters. But you don't need to know. You don't need to know. They're Sibling Dex. They're non-binary. It's not about them being non-binary. They're not ever explaining that. It just is part of who they are as a character. And I really appreciate that there is a book that has this representation in the main character, but it's not about that representation. It's just there and lets them exist the way that they are. I think one of the other things too that I really appreciate here is that this is not like a big epic story. This is a very small and close story. It is two characters having conversations over the course of two novellas. They're philosophical conversations, and there definitely is things that are brought up that discuss things like the climate crisis, the way that capitalism is, the way that this fear that we have that we are creating a bunch of robots and AI to act essentially as slaves for a corporate overlord, um, like, and what that means, and whether the AI and robots are people, like what makes a person. All of those things are sort of discussed in these two like very small books, and it's just some traveling. It's traveling and talking, and that's the whole thing. And I know that some people want like a plot. Um, I didn't need it, and these are short enough that I don't think that it would bother you. Like reading 150-ish pages of some people talking is like perfectly valid. If it was 500 pages of this, I don't know. Maybe I would still love it. I definitely loved 300 pages of it. I read two different books of it. But at least at the moment, like the size and scope of these is fine. Like I'm fine with small stories. I'm fine with stories that are just focusing on thoughts and looking to a future that we could have if we work together towards it. And maybe we need a giant catalyst like every single robot and AI just refusing to work one day. And so now the world has to figure out how to handle this and reconcile with the way that we are using technology, um as slave labor in a lot of ways, which harms both humans who can't do the jobs they were once doing, and also possibly meta humans. I don't know, what would we call an AI that learns and grows and has emotions. So that's there's some discussions on the ethics of possibly living forever. You might think that those robots that walked off into the woods are the same robots that walk out into the woods, and that's not the case. They are robots that have been building and rebuilding and taking parts and pieces from robots that have had parts fail to create new robots. And something happens in the second book that causes Mosscap to suddenly sort of reconcile with their mortality and their ability to stop functioning in the near future. And Sibling Dex offers to fix them because that's one of the things that humans can do. They can make a new part and replace the part that's broken with a new part. And Moscap has to decide in that moment, do I take this new part when no other robot has had a new part in generations, or like what is allowed? Is it morally okay for me to take a new part? So there's discussions there as well, that of like, is it okay for someone to use the resources around them to gain something new? Like what are the morals and ethics around that, that I don't think a lot of us think about. We just, as humans, and Sibling Dex also does this. That is what we do. We fix problems. We build a new thing. We are constantly evolving and changing, rather than taking the old and trying to work with it. Overall, again, I've talked about it. I think that the thing that is so important to me, at least when it comes to the series, and like why I think I enjoyed it so much, is that hopeful view of the future that it has. I think that especially right now when everything feels catastrophic in a way that makes it hard to get up in the morning sometimes, makes it hard to stop looking at my phone and every single news update that's coming out. Um, Reading something like this where like sometimes disaster needs to happen in order for us to progress. Now seeing all of these elections that are happening around the world where far right extremist groups were pretty good, at least in the chances of possibly gaining power in other countries, seeing how those other countries are at least able to react to what is happening here in the US and say, no, actually, we don't want that. That's a problem. It gives me some hope, even though it does mean that those of us here in the US are suffering for other people's gain. I'm glad that everyone else is sort of getting to protect their constitutions and their civil liberties. But having something that I can turn to and say, like, maybe this negative thing will have an overall positive outcome. Sometimes you need to have the system disrupted in this way in order to have a positive outcome, and that there is a positive outcome that can happen. Um, I think that's sort of what's important. So if you, like me, are tired of the dystopias, even though they're very much meant to be talking about what is happening here right now, science fiction is supposed to be a look into the future in a lot of ways, and there is still hope in the world. So I hope that you pick up Monk and Robot, whether in the paperback form or if you get the hard copies. Um, Either way, it's one of my all-time favorite books. I think I will recommend it to anyone and everyone. If you enjoy philosophy, if you enjoy um, science fiction, if you enjoy fantasy and world building, there's a little bit of something for everybody in these books. And even if you don't, if you are like a romance reader or a fiction reader, like let me challenge you to try and pick this up because it's so small. Like it's something so short and heartwarming that I think that even you would really enjoy it, even if it is not your normal cup of tea. And then if you have read it, talk to me down in the bottom. If talk to me in the comments down below. If you haven't read it and you want to read it, please go read it and then come back and talk to me about it, or message me on Blue Sky or wherever. Like, it's one of my all-time favorite books, so I like always want to talk about it. I'm fully willing to hear you gush about it too. If there are other books out there like this that you think I should read, please give me recommendations down below as well. I would super appreciate that. Because hope punk is one of my favorite genres at this point, in the same way that I think that a lot of people are really loving cozy fantasy. I think this is a really good example in the science fiction genre that people can pick up. So if you have other recommendations, please leave them down below. And I will talk to you again soon. In theory, I will have another horror arc review next week. I know like the vibes are very different in horror books, but that's what I'm gonna be doing next week, so I will see you then. Um, Gretchen's still in school, scrambling to do all of her stuff, so when we can get together to do a joint video, we will. At the moment, the only thing planned is for a reading roundtable towards the end of the month, which you will see then. But I hope you guys are having a good time. I again soon.